The bank smelled like old paper and fear. I'd come to associate both with loss. I pushed through the heavy glass door into the First Coastal Bank of Marrowstone, a building so small it could have been mistaken for a particularly ambitious shed. Off-season gray hung over everything. The sky, the ocean visible through the window, the worn carpet under my feet. Even the motivational poster on the wall, "Every journey begins with a single step," looked defeated, its corners curling like it had given up on its own advice. There were two other customers ahead of me, an elderly man depositing what looked like a Social Security check, and a woman in a rain jacket arguing quietly with herself about whether she'd remembered to lock her car. Normal people doing normal things. I envied them. I clutched the ancient passbook in my hand, the last account that still had my name on it. Everything else, the house, the cars, the investment accounts, even the damn Netflix subscription, had been surgically removed by Olivia's lawyers. This account, opened when I was 16 with birthday money from my grandfather, had somehow escaped the feeding frenzy. Maybe because it only had $473 in it. Not enough to fight over, not enough to matter. Except, it mattered to me. It was the last thing. The teller window opened up and I stepped forward. The woman behind the counter was maybe mid-50s, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the kind of perm that suggested she'd been getting the same haircut since 1987. Her nameplate read, Marjorie Pike. "Help you?" she asked, not looking up from her computer screen. I slid the passbook across the counter. "I'd like to close this account." She picked it up with the casual disinterest of someone who'd performed this transaction 10,000 times. Then her eyes focused on the name printed in faded blue ink on the inside cover. Daniel James Keller. Her face went pale. Actually pale. I watched the color drain from her cheeks like someone had opened a valve. Her hand started to tremble. "Is something wrong?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at the passbook like I'd handed her a live grenade. Then she stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Just one moment, please," she stammered. "I need to... I'll be right back." She disappeared into the back office, still clutching my passbook. I stood there at the counter, confused. Behind me, the woman in the rain jacket had apparently decided her car was definitely locked and was now filling out a deposit slip with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Through the frosted glass of the office door, I could see Marjorie's silhouette. She was on the phone, gesturing. Her voice was muffled but urgent. This was not normal. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The old man finished his transaction and left. The rain jacket woman deposited her check and left. A younger guy came in, took one look at me standing alone at the empty counter, and decided whatever he needed could wait. Then Marjorie came out of the office. She walked straight past me to the front door, flipped the open sign to closed, and locked the door. The sound of the bolt sliding home was very loud in the empty bank. "Ms. Pike?" I said. "What's going on?" She turned to face me, and I realized she wasn't just pale, she was scared. "Mr. Keller, I'm going to need you to wait here for a bit. Our lawyer is on his way." "Your lawyer? I'm just trying to close an account." "It's not about the account." She wrung her hands. "It's about... Well, you'll need to speak with Alan. Alan Drew. He's our counsel." She wouldn't say anything else. She just retreated behind the counter and started shuffling papers that clearly didn't need shuffling, avoiding my eyes. I could have left, should have left. But something kept me rooted there. The way she'd reacted to my name, the locked door, the lawyer. After all I'd lost, after everything Olivia had taken, the one thing I still had was curiosity, the writer's disease, the need to know how the story ends, even when you're pretty sure you're not going to like it. So I waited. I walked around the small lobby, studying the walls. There were photographs in frames, the bank's history, frozen in black and white and faded color, A ribbon-cutting ceremony from 1952, a shot of the original building, which had apparently been even smaller, and there, in a frame near the back, a photograph from 1974, 3 men in suits standing in front of a building under construction. I recognized one of them immediately. My grandfather, James Keller, younger than I'd ever known him, shaking hands with another man identified in the caption as Robert Pike, bank president. The third man stood slightly apart, holding what looked like architectural plans. The building in the background was unmistakable even in its skeletal form. The mansion, the house my grandfather built on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, the house where I'd grown up, the house Olivia now owned, the house that used to be mine. I stared at that photograph for a long time. My grandfather's face was confident, proud. He'd built something that would last, something to leave to his family. And I'd lost it to a woman who'd been sleeping with another man in our bed while I was teaching freshman composition at the community college. The bitterness rose in my throat like bile. I tasted it every day now, woke up with it, went to bed with it. It was the one constant in my life since the divorce. The door rattled. A key turned. A man in his 40s entered, wearing a suit that had seen better days and carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than both of us. He had the cautious eyes of someone who'd spent too much time preventing other people's disasters. "Mr. Keller," he said, "I'm Alan Drew. Thank you for waiting. I didn't have much choice. Your employee locked me in." "Yes, I'm sorry about that." He glanced at Marjorie, who'd shrunk into herself behind the counter. "Marjorie, why don't you take an early lunch?" She practically ran for the back exit. Alan gestured to a small conference room off the lobby. "Would you mind?" I followed him into a room that smelled like old coffee and air freshener. He closed the door, set his briefcase on the table, and pulled out a file folder. Then he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mr. Keller, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. How much do you know about the deed to your grandfather's property?" "What property?" The land where the mansion sits." I frowned. "What about it? My ex-wife owns it now. The divorce decree was pretty clear." "The decree gave her the house, yes, but—" He opened the folder and pulled out a photocopy of an old document. I could see cramped handwriting, official stamps, my grandfather's signature. The land itself was placed in a family trust in 1972, when your grandfather built the house. The trust had very specific conditions. "What kind of conditions?" He pulled out another document. This one looked more recent. "When your grandfather took out the construction loan to build the house, the bank placed a lien on the property. That lien was supposed to be released when the loan was paid off in 1978. But there was a clerical error. The release was never properly filed." I stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that according to county records, this bank still holds a valid lien on the land under your ex-wife's house, and the trust conditions may override her claim to ownership entirely." The words hit me like cold water. "That's impossible. My lawyers would have caught that during the divorce." "With respect, Mr. Keller, divorce attorneys aren't usually looking for obscure property trust documents from 50 years ago. They're focused on the assets as they currently exist. And if no one told them to dig deeper—" He spread his hands. "These things slip through." I sat back in my chair. My heart was pounding. "So what does this mean?" "It means," Alan said carefully, "that your ex-wife may not actually own what she thinks she owns. It means there could be grounds to challenge her possession of the property." For the first time since Olivia had served me with divorce papers, since she'd stood in our bedroom, my bedroom, the bedroom in my grandfather's house, and told me she'd been sleeping with Blake Harrington for 6 months, since the judge had signed the decree that gave her everything while I moved into a studio apartment above a bait shop that smelled like rotting fish and broken dreams. For the first time since all of that, I felt something other than helpless rage. I felt hope, and underneath it, darker and more dangerous, I felt possibility. "I'll need to verify some things," Alan was saying. "Pull the original trust documents, confirm the lien status. But if you're interested in pursuing this, Mr. Keller, we should talk about your options." "My options," I repeated slowly. "Yes. There might be a path forward here. It wouldn't be simple, and it certainly wouldn't be quick, but—" "I'm interested," I said. He nodded. "All right. I'll need a few days to gather everything. Let me do my due diligence, and then we'll sit down and discuss the specifics." "Can I see those documents?" I asked, pointing to the photocopies. "I'd rather keep the originals secure, but—" He hesitated, then slid one copy across. "I can let you have this, just the first page of the trust declaration. But please, Mr. Keller, don't do anything precipitous. Let me handle the legal research first." I took the paper. It was a photocopy of a photocopy, the text barely legible, but I could make out my grandfather's signature and the words Keller Family Trust and restrictions on conveyance. "Thank you," I said. We shook hands. He walked me to the door. Marjorie was back behind the counter, still looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. The young guy who'd left earlier was waiting outside, checking his watch with visible irritation. Alan unlocked the door, and I stepped out into the gray afternoon. The salt air hit my face. The ocean was rough today, whitecaps visible even from here. I stood on the sidewalk, holding that photocopy, staring at my grandfather's signature from 1972. According to this document, the land under the mansion still belonged to the Keller Family Trust, and for the first time since Olivia threw me out, I felt something close to hope, and something much, much darker. As the story unfolds, hit the hype button, like, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive them or walk away? My apartment was above Wexler's Bait and Tackle, accessible by an exterior staircase that rattled in the wind and probably violated at least 6 building codes. The apartment itself was a studio with water-stained ceilings, a kitchenette where 2 appliances couldn't run simultaneously without tripping the breaker, and windows that faced the parking lot of a shuttered fish processing plant. I'd moved here 3 months ago, the week the divorce was finalized, the week Olivia got the mansion and I got the rest of my life in a box. I climbed the stairs, unlocked the door that stuck in humid weather, and dropped my keys on the counter. The photocopy from the bank went next to my laptop. I stared at it while I made instant coffee in the microwave. The machine hummed and stopped. I drank the coffee standing up, still staring. A trust. A lien. A legal technicality from half a century ago. The thing about being a novelist, even a mid-list novelist whose last advance barely covered a used Toyota, is that you learn to think in terms of structure. Setup, complication, climax, resolution. But I needed facts. Real facts. Not hope and a photocopy. I grabbed my jacket and headed back out. The Marrowstone County Courthouse was a brick building that looked like someone had started to renovate it in 1983 and given up halfway through. A bored clerk sat behind a desk, playing a game on her phone. She barely looked up when I entered. "Help you?" "I need to look at property records, deed transfers, family trusts, anything filed for a property on Cliff House Road in 1972. She sighed the sigh of someone whose day had just gotten marginally more complicated. "Property address?" I gave it to her. My old address. The numbers still came automatically. Muscle memory from 10 years of writing them on forms and packages and the backs of checks. She typed with 2 fingers, her nails clicking on the keyboard. "Gonna be on microfiche. That far back, we haven't digitized it." "That's fine. You know how to use a microfiche reader? I'll figure it out." She stood, pulled a key ring from her drawer, and led me to a back room that smelled like dust and old paper and the particular must of documents nobody had touched in decades. Against one wall stood a row of filing cabinets. Against another, a microfiche machine that looked like it belonged in a museum. 1972 Cliff House Road, she muttered, pulling open drawers and flipping through files. Her fingers found a small box. She pulled it out, checked the label, and handed it to me. There you go. Machine's over there. Try not to break it. She left me alone in the room. The fluorescent lights hummed their constant note of despair. This was hell, I thought. Hell wasn't fire. Hell was fluorescent lights humming over municipal carpeting while you squinted at microfiche, searching for the paperwork that proved your life had been stolen. I sat at the machine, loaded the film, and started scrolling. Deed transfers, lot surveys, property tax assessments, page after page of cramped handwriting and official stamps. My eyes started to hurt after 20 minutes. I kept going. Then I found it. Declaration of Trust, Keller Family Real Property Trust, dated March 15, 1972, filed with the county on March 22, 1972. I slowed down, reading carefully. My grandfather had created the trust when he purchased the land. The house hadn't been built yet. This was just for the land itself, 2 acres on the cliff overlooking the ocean. The trust named his descendants as beneficiaries. Standard stuff. But then, 3 paragraphs down, there was a clause I had to read twice to believe. In the event that any property conveyed from this trust to a descendant's spouse is subject to dissolution of marriage due to adultery or infidelity, said property shall revert to the trust, and the conveyance shall be deemed void ab initio. Void from the beginning, as if it had never happened. I sat back in the chair, read it again and again. Or a prophet. The next document was the construction lien from First Coastal Bank. Standard language about securing the loan, supposed to be released upon full payment. I scrolled forward, looking for the release form. It wasn't there. I scrolled back, checked the next year. The year after. Nothing. Just a note that the loan had been paid in full in 1978, but no formal release of the lien filed with the county. Someone had forgotten to file the paperwork, or lost it, or decided it didn't matter. But it mattered now. I printed copies of everything using the ancient printer that wheezed and groaned like it was giving birth. The clerk barely looked at me when I paid the fee. I walked out of the courthouse with a folder full of ammunition. The Historical Society was my next stop. It occupied a Victorian house 3 blocks from the waterfront, the kind of place that probably had 12 separate committees devoted to preserving the original doorknobs. Inside, it smelled like old books and lavender potpourri. A woman with white hair and half-moon glasses sat at the front desk. "May I help you?" "I'm researching a property from the 1970s, the Keller House on Cliff House Road. I'm trying to understand the history of the land and the trust that was set up." Her face brightened. "Oh, the Keller House. Such a beautiful property. Your grandfather built that, didn't he?" "You knew him?" Everyone knew James Keller. He was very involved in local preservation efforts, very particular about things being done properly. She stood. "Let me show you what we have." She led me to a reading room where boxes of photographs and documents were organized by decade. She pulled out a box labeled 1970s, Construction and Development, and set it on the table. "Take your time," she said. "If you need copies of anything, just let me know." I started going through the box. Photographs of the mansion under construction, newspaper clippings about my grandfather's development plans, letters to the editor arguing about cliff erosion and property rights. And then, tucked in a manila envelope, I found something interesting, a letter from my grandfather to the bank president, Robert Pike, dated 1972. "Robert, I want to be absolutely clear about the terms of this trust. The land must remain in the family. I've seen too many properties carved up and sold off piece by piece after the original owner dies. This house is meant to last. It's meant to be a legacy. The conditions I've included in the trust aren't because I don't trust my descendants. It's because I don't trust the world they'll inherit. Make sure those conditions are properly recorded." Make sure they can't be easily undone. James. I read that letter 3 times. My grandfather had built this house to last forever. He'd put protections in place, buried them in old documents and trusts and bank liens, betting that someday someone in the family would need them. He'd been right. I gathered my copies and left the Historical Society as the afternoon light started to fade. Walked down to the waterfront, stood at the railing looking out at the gray ocean. 3 months ago, Olivia had stood in the courthouse lobby after the final hearing, her lawyer beside her, and looked at me with something like pity. "I hope you can move on, Daniel," she'd said. "I really do. You deserve to be happy." As if I was a child who'd lost his favorite toy and just needed time to adjust. I hadn't said anything. What was there to say? She'd already won. The judge had signed the papers. Her lawyer had shaken my lawyer's hand and talked about lunch plans. It was over. Except it wasn't over. I'd thought I was a victim, a man betrayed, the sad writer who lost his house to his beautiful, ambitious wife and her rich lover. But standing there at the waterfront railing with that folder of documents under my arm, I realized something. I wasn't a victim. I was just someone who hadn't moved yet. And now, it was time to move. I pulled out my phone and called Alan Drew. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mr. Keller?" "I've been to the courthouse and the Historical Society," I said. "I've got copies of the trust declaration and the bank lien. I've read the adultery clause." A pause. "I see, that was fast. How long until you can confirm everything?" "I'll need to review the full chain of title, verify that the lien is still valid, consult some case law, a few days, maybe a week. And if everything checks out, if the trust conditions hold and the lien is valid?" Another pause, longer this time. "Then we'd have grounds to challenge your ex-wife's ownership. We could potentially force a reversion of the property to the trust, with you as the managing trustee." "How would that work practically?" "It would mean serving her with notice, filing in court. She'd almost certainly fight it. It could take months, even years, and it wouldn't be cheap." "But it's possible." "Yes, it's possible." I looked out at the ocean. The waves were getting rougher as the wind picked up. Storm coming in tonight, probably. "Call me when you've verified everything," I said. "I want to discuss next steps." "Mr. Keller, I have to advise you, even if we win, the process could be ugly. These kinds of disputes get personal, and your ex-wife has resources." "Call me when you've verified everything," I repeated. I hung up, walked back to my apartment above the bait shop, made more instant coffee and sat at my laptop, opened a blank document. For the first time in months, I knew what I was going to write. The title at the top of the page read, "How to Destroy the People Who Destroyed You." Below it, I started making notes, not for a novel, for a plan. Step 1. Secure the legal foundation. Trust documents, bank lien, adultery clause. Step 2. Learn everything about Olivia's new life, her patterns, her weaknesses, her public image. Step 3. Make her think she's won, then pull everything out from under her. I typed for hours, made lists, drew diagrams, mapped out timelines. By midnight, I had the structure of something that might have been a thriller plot if it wasn't my actual life. I saved the document, closed the laptop, lay down on the pull-out couch that served as my bed, stared at the water-stained ceiling. Olivia had once told me I was too passive, too willing to let the world happen to me instead of taking action. She'd said it during one of our fights, back when we were still bothering to fight instead of just avoiding each other. "You're a spectator in your own life, Daniel," she'd said. "You watch and take notes and write stories about people doing things, but you never actually do anything yourself." She'd been right, but that was going to change. I closed my eyes and thought about my grandfather's letter, about legacy and protection and making things that lasted. I fell asleep thinking about the mansion on the cliff and how sweet it would be to take it back. The storm got worse overnight. By morning, the power was out in half the town, trees down, flooding on the coast road, the kind of nor'easter that made locals hunker down and tourists regret their quaint New England vacation. I woke to my phone buzzing, multiple calls from Alan, a voicemail. "Mr. Keller, we need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this." I called him from my car on the way to the college. Classes were canceled, but I had to pick up some papers from my office. "They've retained counsel," Alan said without preamble. "Baker and Ross, out of Portland, expensive firm. They've already filed a motion to dismiss and are threatening harassment charges over the scene last night. Let them. Mr. Keller, they're also filing for a restraining order, claiming you trespassed on the property, that you've been stalking them on social media, that last night was a coordinated attempt to humiliate and intimidate. Can they prove any of that? The trespassing, if they have evidence, yes. The social media, hard to prove unless you've been stupid about it. I haven't. Good, because their strategy is going to be painting you as a bitter ex-husband engaged in a revenge campaign. They'll argue that the trust conditions are outdated and unenforceable, that the lien is too old to matter, and that you're abusing the legal system. Can they win? Not on the merits. But they can make this expensive and ugly, drag it out for years, bury us in motions and depositions and discovery requests. Let them try. Mr. Keller, I'm not stopping, Alan. We knew this would happen. We planned for it. A long pause. All right. But you need to be careful. No more surprise visits. No more public confrontations. We do this by the book from here on out. Agreed. I hung up and drove to the college. The campus was mostly empty, wind whipping the trees, rain coming in sheets. For the rest of the day, I monitored the fallout. The videos had gone fully viral. News outlets were picking it up. "Charity Gala turns violent after property dispute" was one headline. "Bitter divorce gets uglier as ex crashes party" was another. Lila was doing multiple follow-up posts, breaking down every angle. She'd somehow gotten copies of the legal documents and was explaining the trust conditions to her followers. The comments were divided. Some people thought I was justified. Others thought I was a stalker. Most just enjoyed the drama. By evening, there were protesters outside the mansion. Not many, maybe a dozen people with signs. Some supported Olivia and Blake, leave them alone, and jealousy isn't justice. Others supported me. Cheaters don't deserve mansions, and read the fine print. It was absurd, surreal. My life had become a reality show. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. Olivia. I stared at the screen, let it ring 3 times. Then answered. "Daniel." Her voice was strained. "We need to talk." "Your lawyer already tried. I'm not interested in a settlement." "This isn't about the settlement. This is about..." She paused. "You left a letter, and Blake found something in his desk. The trust document photocopy. He'd finally found it." "What about it?" I asked. "You were in our house. You broke in." "Did I? Don't play games. We know it was you. 3 weeks ago. You left that tie on the bed, moved things, left that document. Prove it." "Daniel, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes. I know that. But this, what you're doing, it's not healthy. It's not going to make you feel better." "You're wrong about that. Just tell me what you want, really want. Is it money? Is it the house? Is it just to hurt us?" I thought about that question. Really thought about it. "I want you to understand what you took from me," I said finally. "I want you to feel what I felt when I came home and smelled his cologne, when I saw the texts on your phone, when you stood in our bedroom, my grandfather's house, and told me you were in love with someone else. I'm sorry. I want you to know that you're not safe, that you can't just take things and expect to keep them, that there are consequences. Daniel, And I want Blake to understand that money can't fix everything, that cars and houses and status don't make you untouchable. You're scaring me. Good. I hung up, sat in the dark apartment, listening to the storm rage outside. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Started out wanting the house back. Then it became about revenge, about making them pay. But now I wanted to see how far I could push, how much damage I could do, how completely I could dismantle their perfect life. The lawyer had called it a revenge campaign. The dean had called it a public feud. Olivia had called it unhealthy. They were all right, and I didn't care. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. If you don't stop this, you'll regret it. I know people. I can make your life very difficult. Blake. I smiled. Typed back. Already tried that. I'm the one making your life difficult now. How's that working out? No response. I opened my laptop, started planning the next phase. The legal battle would continue. That was just paperwork and court dates. Boring, but necessary. But there were other ways to hurt them. Other pressure points. Blake's business, his reputation, his ego, Olivia's clients, her social standing, her image. I started researching, found Blake's development company website, his list of current projects, his investor presentations, found Olivia's business listings, her client testimonials, her carefully curated professional image, and I started thinking about how to crack both of them open. The storm outside rattled the windows. The lights flickered but stayed on. I worked until 3 a.m., taking notes, making plans, building the next act of this story. Tomorrow, their lawyers would file motions. They'd try to paint me as unstable, dangerous. Let them. I was past the point of caring what anyone thought. The only thing that mattered now was finishing what I'd started, and I was just getting started. 3 days after the gala, Blake's car was found in the harbor, not the one I'd sabotaged. That was still in the shop. This was his other one, the Tesla, the one he'd posted on Instagram 50 times. Someone had driven it off the boat launch downtown, right into the water. The police pulled it out at low tide, completely totaled. Blake immediately claimed I'd done it, filed a police report naming me as a suspect. The problem was, I hadn't, and I could prove it. That night, I'd been at a college faculty dinner with 20 witnesses. The dean himself could vouch for my whereabouts. The police interviewed me anyway. 2 detectives in my crappy apartment, looking around at my circumstances with obvious judgment. Mr. Keller, we understand you're involved in a property dispute with Mr. Harrington. That's correct. And you assaulted him at a charity event last week. He assaulted me. There's video. Right. Well, Mr. Harrington believes you vandalized his vehicle. I showed them my phone, photos from the faculty dinner, time-stamped, receipts from the restaurant, text messages with colleagues. I was at a dinner from 6 p.m. until after midnight. Call the dean if you want confirmation. They did. Came back looking frustrated. All right, Mr. Keller, you're in the clear for this. But we're going to advise you, stay away from Mr. Harrington. Stay away from the property. Don't give him any reason to make more accusations. I haven't been near him or the property since the gala. They left. I watched them go, then sat down and thought about who would have dumped Blake's car in the harbor. The answer came 3 hours later in a text from an unknown number. Thought you could use a gift. Consider it a preview of what's coming. A friend. No way to trace it. Burner number, probably. Someone who'd seen the videos and decided to take matters into their own hands. Or maybe it was one of Blake's other enemies. A man like that made enemies, business rivals, people he'd screwed over, ex-girlfriends. Either way, it wasn't my problem. Blake couldn't prove anything, and the police had cleared me, but it rattled Blake. He hired private security for the mansion, put cameras everywhere, started posting paranoid rants on social media about criminal harassment and conspiracies. Olivia tried to distance herself from his spiral. She posted calm, professional updates about her real estate business, avoided mentioning Blake or the property dispute. But her client list was shrinking. I could track it through public records and tax assessments. Properties she'd been listing were going to other agents. Her website traffic was down. The scandal was poisoning her brand. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, from my office at the college, from coffee shops where I sat with my laptop and monitored the damage. Alan called regularly with updates on the legal case, motions filed, responses submitted, court dates scheduled, the machinery of justice grinding forward at its usual glacial pace. Their lawyers are arguing the trust conditions are discriminatory, he told me. That modern courts won't enforce moral clauses based on adultery. Will that work? Unlikely. The trust was legal when it was created. The conditions were clear. Your grandfather had the right to specify how his property would be handled. So we're still winning? On paper. But they're trying to drag this out. Make it expensive. Wear you down. Let them try. 2 weeks after the gala, I got a call from the dean again. Daniel, we need to talk. In person. I knew what was coming before I walked into his office. The board of trustees met last night, he said without preamble. They're concerned about the ongoing publicity around your situation. The videos, the police reports, the social media drama. I've done nothing wrong. That's not the point. The point is perception. We're a small school. We can't afford this kind of attention. What are you saying? I'm saying that your contract is up for review at the end of the semester. The board is recommending we don't renew it. I'd known it was coming. Still felt like a punch to the gut. I'm being fired because my ex-wife cheated on me, and I had the audacity to fight back legally. You're being let go because your personal life has become a distraction. I'm sorry, Daniel. Truly. But this is a business decision. I walked out of his office, drove straight to the coast road overlook, sat there watching the ocean, feeling the cold clarity of loss. My marriage, gone. My house, in legal limbo. My job, ending in 3 months. Everything I'd built in this town was burning. And yet I felt lighter. That night I went back to the mansion. Not to break in, not to sabotage anything, just to look at it. The security cameras were obvious now. The gates were reinforced. Lights blazed from every window. Blake and Olivia were inside, afraid, barricaded, paranoid, and they should be, because I'd realized something sitting at that overlook. I'd been playing by rules that didn't matter anymore, trying to maintain some version of civility, some limit to how far I'd go. But why? They'd taken everything, my home, my marriage, now my job. What did I have left to lose? I pulled out my phone, sent a text to Blake's number. Enjoying the fortress? Must be exhausting being this scared. Sleep tight. Then I drove to a hardware store, bought supplies, rope, flares, a few other things. Not for anything illegal, just for options. Back at my apartment, I laid everything out on the table, stared at it. I could keep playing the legal game, wait for the courts, hope justice prevailed. Or I could take matters into my own hands. The thought should have scared me, should have made me back down. Instead, it made me smile. I opened my laptop, started mapping out the mansion's security system, the camera locations I'd observed, the blind spots, the response times of the private security Blake had hired. Then I planned something that would make the bank break-in look like a warm-up. Not tonight, but soon. Very soon. My phone buzzed, a text from Olivia. Daniel, please, let's meet. Just you and me. No lawyers. We can end this. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, There's nothing to end. This is already over. You just don't know it yet. Sent. Put down the phone, went back to planning.